Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I want to tell you a story about back when I got married, 2003. Okay. And I think my mom was trying to help, and she gave me a cookbook called Set It and no. It was for Fix It and Forget It. Fix It and Forget It cookbook. And it was tons of pictures about cooking in your crock pot. So tons of recipes that you could put, I mean, literally put anything in the crock pot and cook it. It had desserts, it had sides, it had meats, it had all the things. And I think, well, and I know she was trying to help me out. I was a teacher. I was teaching kids at a special needs school. And before I started teaching kindergarten, and she was trying to make my life easier, giving me a plan in the form of a cookbook. Okay. So the plan was, here are these recipes. These are easy. These are like, 5, 6 ingredients or less. And it did, it alleviated a lot, because when I was first married, I was like, oh, I guess I need to, prepare a meal to eat, or we're not going to eat that night. And so I remember I was working 40 hours a week in the classroom. And then, if you have been around a teacher, or if you have been a teacher or are a teacher, that it's much more than 40 hours a week, right? But I wasn't going to have a lot of time. I needed an easy plan. I needed something that I would do and that I would actually get done, and that it would be great. Okay. So little did she know. I mean, like, if there was an air fryer in the 2003s, I probably would have been set, maybe. But little did we know that Ren is not going to be a great cook. I don't enjoy it, but I do it. Okay, we have to. And so it was filled with crockpot recipes to make it easier. And when I remember the book called Fix It and Forget It, I think that the title was coined or was renamed or kind of taken after this guy named Ron. Let me make sure I get it right. Ron Popeil. Ron Popeil coined the phrase. Okay, this was him. He coined the phrase, set it and forget it. And so I think that cookbook, Fix It and Forget It, is definitely from what he named in the early 90s as you set it and you forget it. So if you don't know who Ron Popeil is or was, he was very influential in infomercials. And he probably is one that if you see him, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's the guy from all the infomercials back in the 90s. Okay. So I was a kid growing up in the 90s, and he had this phrase, set it and forget it. And this is what it was. He started having infomercials, and he did like a lot, like at the chopper. And then there were a couple other things, but the product that I want to tell you about it was a barbecue cooker thing. It was huge, it was huge. But you open the lid, you put your piece of meat or meats in there, and then you would set it in, and then you close it up, you set the timer and forget it. And you just walk away and, until the timer went off. And so what he would say is, you've probably heard this. He would say, but wait, there's more. So if you've ever seen an infomercial or have heard, but wait, there's more, we're going to add this. And for only $19.95, you're going to get the barbecue thing, and you're going to get a knife to slice it with, but wait, there's more. So he also brought in that. Okay. So when he would pull out the meat from it, he would say, look, all I had to do, and cut it in front of everybody. They had, at that point with infomercials, they had a live audience, and they would do these infomercials with a live audience. And so, all the audience is buying into it. And you're like, this is amazing. I need one of those barbecue fryers like right now. You would call the 800 number, please let me, whatever. And he would pull out the meat, and he would say, yeah, I just had to set it. And the audience would go, and forget it. So it was just a phrase that he originated. And so when I think of set it and forget it, I don't think of Ron Popeil, even though I'm so glad that he created all these products. I know some people probably maybe even still have them in grandma's pantry. I don't know. But when I hear set it and forget it, I think of a type of podcast. Now, hang with me. So, set it and forget it. Another word for it might be a limited edition podcast. It also might be called a podcast capsule. It might be a one and done. I think I've called it that before. But mainly when I say set it and forget it, it is a few episodes, a few podcast episodes that you release all at once, and that's it. You set it up and then you forget about it. Not really totally forget about it, but you don't actively post monthly, weekly, however a normal, typical podcast would be updated or a new episode would come out. It is a 6 to 12 episodes that you have a strong call to action and you set it up and then they stay there. And that is your main marketing for your business. Okay. So when I say set it up and forget it, I'm talking about the one and done podcast. I'm talking about a capsule. And so what I want to talk to you about today is I have really sat down and said, okay, what are the pros and what are the cons of this? Because I want you to be fully informed when you are going to start a podcast. You want to be informed with what type of format. And this is a podcast. It's more of a set it and forget it, but it is a type of podcast and you have to be super strategic with this. And so I want to give you the pros and cons of it so that you know. Okay. So let's jump in. So a few weeks ago, I posted an episode that was start a podcast in part-time hours. And I share with you ways that you could start your podcast in part-time hours. If you are a young mom with kiddos, young kiddos at home, and you see the benefits of this for your business, you see the podcast benefits, the advantages, and you're like, I got to do that, but this is not the time. I totally get that. And if you are wanting to do a weekly podcast, you might need to just pause and say, this is not the right time. But if that is you and you really do want to start a podcast and you say, I really do have part-time hours, but I really want to have this set it and forget it. Like I still want the benefits of it. That is the first pro that I'm going to share with you. So the first pro of having the set it and forget it podcast is really that you have the convenience of not having to post every week or every month. So it's really, it can work in your time frame as you are not updating weekly. You're not updating monthly. You are recording your episodes and then you are setting it and forgetting it. And you're not having to create new content, fresh content every week. Okay. So that's a pro. All right. You don't have to be consistent in the weekly posting. You don't have to take the time to do the weekly posting or the monthly posting. Okay. So that's one. Also is the time constraints that you would have. So one is you don't have to be consistent in that or more. You can have and if you have time constraints. Okay. So those two things. So that's really two. Be consistent in your posting when you don't have to do it weekly. You do it once and then you're done. And then if you have time constraints. Okay. So if you have time constraints and you don't want to have to post every week, those are pros. Those are pros for this set it and forget it podcast. So you have another pro is that you have 6 to 12 episodes. You have a finite number of podcast episodes. It's not an infinite number. It is exactly how many you set out to make. And you say, okay, I want to test it out. That's the pro. You get to test it out and see, maybe you really like podcasting and you might even want to do it weekly. But having the set it and forget it podcast is a set number of episodes. Okay. So you can strategically plan that well. Okay. So those are the pros. All right. And then also I mentioned this, if you have young kids at home or your business is very on the move, or you have a full-time career that you have, and then also you have a side business and you're wanting to make that into a full-time business, this would be a great thing for you as well. So set it and forget it. The pros are if you have a time constraint, this can work for you and you could still have a podcast. Second, you don't have to be consistent. You don't have to post weekly. You only have 6 to 12 episodes. Usually it's 6 to 12. You can do 4, and I've seen some go more, but I really recommend 6 to 12. And then you have that. And then if you have little ones at home, or if your schedule looks differently, you can still have a podcast. Okay. So things to consider. I want you to consider this when you are going to do a set it and forget it podcast. A few of the cons. If you are a highly creative person and you don't like being put in a box with your creativity, let me say this: set it and forget it is not going to be for you. If you enjoy writing, if you enjoy doing things spur the moment, if you enjoy following your heart and getting that idea in the middle of the night where you're writing it on your bedside table on a notepad, or if you're running home after getting the groceries and you're writing things down because of the great idea that you had, or you're in the shower thinking, oh, that's a great idea for a podcast. If you are a highly creative person, then a set it and forget it podcast is probably not going to be for you, because you feel like your creativity is getting stifled. And as a creative, I can tell you, I don't like my creativity getting stifled. Like, I don't like to be put in a box. Don't put me in a corner, baby. Right. And so I want you to consider that. That is a con, is that if you're highly creative, a set it and forget it podcast might not be for you. Now, number 2, a set it and forget it podcast will take more time on the front end. So on the front end, it's going to take more time because you have to create, you have to write 6 to 12 episodes all at once, schedule them, publish them, record them, edit them, all the things. Okay. Now, obviously, you don't have to say, well, I'm going to do it in 2 weeks. No, let's be realistic. But I definitely think that if you know that ahead of time, and you know that with the set it and forget it, you're like, okay, I can plan for it. But if you are the type of person that doesn't like to take on big projects and doesn't like to spend a lot of time on the front end for the benefits later on, then this might not be for you. Okay. If you like the hustle and bustle and getting it all and like doing it all and all in, if you like the hustle and bustle of that, then this could be for you. Okay. And then the next con, I would say, is if you have a lot of content to share, and if you have a lot of seasonal products or seasonal courses or changing products or things that haven't really been your signature course or signature coaching program, then this probably wouldn't be for you. If you like to highlight different times of the year of different things that you have going on, or you have a course, or like 4 times a year, I'm going to be doing master classes for people who already have podcasts. And so if I want to highlight that on my podcast, which I do, and I want to encourage people through it, I wouldn't want to do a set it and forget it podcast, because I want to be able to have the flexibility in my creativity to use the podcast as part of my marketing strategy. And so if you have seasonal products or things that maybe you're not one signature program, then this would be probably a con for you to have a set it and forget it. Okay. So those are the pros. Those are the cons. Okay. So I'm going to be gut level honest with you. A set it and forget it podcast might not be for you. It might not be. But I am going to say that a podcast is right for your business. Not necessarily the set it and forget it, not necessarily the weekly, but a podcast, one of these types, is going to work for your business. And I remember a few years ago, I was in Jennifer Allwood's inner circle, and I remember she was coming up with objections for people that couldn't join for the $47 a month. Listen, I was paying $47 a month before I ever made my first dollar. You have to invest before you see the return. Before I realized what my business was going to be. And I remember her saying, a lot of people are a few people could have objected with this and said, well, you're probably thinking, oh, I can't afford $47 a month. I'm not making any money, or I'm not making that much, or I need to save all my money for other things. And I remember she would say so clearly, you can't afford not to. And so I want to say that for, when, let's just say you decide to start a podcast and you decide, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast. Maybe it's a set it and forget it. Maybe it's a weekly podcast. Maybe it's a monthly podcast. And you're saying, I'm just going to research on Google what my graphic, the qualifications for the graphic, what size it needs to be, all the things that I need for it to be submitted to Apple Podcast. And maybe you'll say, I'll just use my earbuds, I always say earbuds, my AirPods to record. I'll just, push play. I won't mess with anything else. I can do this on my own. And then get the microphone, put the earbuds and AirPods and just talk, and it'll be fine. Like it's good. And then I'll tell them to go buy my stuff at the end, like perfect. And then you get into it a little bit later and you're like, you know what? I'm not seeing any ROI. I'm not seeing any return on my investment through this. Maybe I got to add strategy to this. And y'all, that's the thing, is that you can do all the things and find the things on Google and launch your podcast and all the things. But then you can maybe even upload your graphic, and you can do that, and you can talk in the microphone, and your quality of audio won't be good, and then you're not going to know the content that you're going to share. And then you're not going to know how to launch. And then you're not going to know how to edit and how to record and how to save and how to get a hosting site and the order of everything. You're not going to have a launch sequence that you follow or a calendar, and you're not going to know the content. And have you ever heard of the expression, people make a mountain out of a molehill? Well, it will become a mountain. The molehill will become a mountain because you didn't start it out correctly and with strategy. And so that's where I come in. That's where I come in, is where I come in and help you with either one of these, the set it and forget it or the weekly podcast, different formats. And I come in and I show you exactly, I give you step by step, and I show you the strategy that you need to have it. And I walk you through that. And I walk you through with talking about what your title should be for your episodes, and talk to you about that. And then also what your content should be. I give you a content calendar, and then a streamlined process that I give you so that you can keep this up on a weekly basis. And I give you that strategy behind it. And we even talk with how to come up with a name for your podcast. And I give you strategy behind that. And so when Jennifer said, you can't afford not to, I'm going to say this: if you want to start a podcast and you're thinking you can just do it on the side and just try to figure it all and piece it all together, I'm going to say you can't afford not to start a podcast, and you can't afford not to let me walk this journey with you and show you the easiest way, the simplest way to do this, and still have a podcast that you are not spending hours on end trying to figure out. And then it will lead back into your business through clients and through having warm leads come into your business because of the podcast. And so I wanted to share with you these pros and the cons for set it and forget it. But I also wanted to just behoove you to what is that word? Behoove. I don't know. I want to encourage you. If you're thinking about a podcast, I want you to take that first step. I have a free download for you, and it is your first 6 steps of starting your podcast. And if you want that, you can go to the show notes and you can go and check that out and get your first 6 steps. And then that will put you on my email list, and you will get an email from me once a week of podcasting tips and tricks. And just remember all of this, okay? Whether you do the set it and forget it, or whether you do the weekly, or if it's just not the right time, that you know that this is growing, and maybe you want to schedule a call with me, maybe in, August or the fall coming up. I am looking for driven, Christ honoring women who want to do this for their business, who want to start a podcast, to have that exploding your exposure and bringing people into your business. I would love to do that with you. And so you can also book a call with me, and that will be in the show notes as well. And remember all of this, okay? I'm here to help. So, because life's too short to just wing it. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.